How's it going, everyone? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I've got some all grain mashes planned and they're coming up soon on the channel, so I thought it would be smart to do a Distillers 101 guide to all grain mashing first. Welcome Distiller everyone, I'm Jesse and this is the channel all about chasing the craft of home distillation and making it a legitimate hobby. So if that's what you're into, guys, if that cracks your corn, make sure you have a look around, check my stuff out, and if you dig it, make sure you subscribe down below so you don't miss anything. If you guys follow what I'm doing closely, you'll probably realize that I've been a little bit absent for the last fortnight. It has been bonkers. I feel like I haven't been home at all. I've been doing all sorts of crazy stuff, but I'm back now and I want to get stuck into some cool stuff for Still It. What I'm going to do today is a quick video to prepare those of you that haven't had the joys of all grain distilling for what's coming up soon. So what am I talking about when I say all grain mashes? The idea is that you can take grains, cereal grains mostly, and essentially take the starch and magically convert it into sugar, which you can feed to your yeast, and then of course ferment it and distill it further on down the track. So an all grain mash is something that is using only cereal. You're not adding any simple sugar, table sugar, raw sugar, molasses, any of that sort of stuff. The only thing you're using is essentially starch, and you control the process of how you turn that starch into sugar. It's pretty freaking cool, really. So what is the absolute basics of a all grain mash? Essentially you need water, you need starch, you need enzymes, and you need heat. Or more correctly, you need the right temperature. The water's pretty easy. You can go way down the rabbit warren on that. I'm not going to do that for a long time on Still It yet because it is, in my opinion, the last thing you should be looking at. But what we are going to talk about today is the starch, the enzymes, and the heat. Cool? Now that I've said that, I want to go way back and talk about what malted barley or other malted grains are. And the reason I want to do this is, if you're going to do things traditionally, it is the basis for pretty much any all grain mash you could ever do. It really is. It's that simple. So let's have a talk about what malted barley is to start with. To malt barley, first of all, you want to steep it. You want to soak it in water. And the idea is that you are getting that little seed to germinate and start growing. When that process is triggered in the seed, it starts generating enzymes that are able to take the starch source, the food source for the seed, and turn it into a food source so the little tiny plant can start growing. The maltsters will stop that process before it really takes off by kilning the barley. And essentially what they're doing is drying it right out to stop the process, to stop it from growing and halt the process at just the right spot where we've still got lots of starch but also a whole lot of enzymes. The key at this stage is to heat it and dry it enough that it stops that process and makes it, a relatively shelf-stable product, but it does not denature the enzymes. We're going to need those guys later on. So right now, guys, pretty much most places you are in the world, you're going to be able to buy malted barley that is done extremely well from homebrew stores pretty much anywhere on the globe. But it might be a little bit more expensive in different places. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but really it is pretty hard to find a place that you cannot source malted barley. On the other hand, some people take pride in doing it themselves, like my man Bearded and Bored, and if you would like to look into the process of doing that yourself a little bit more, you should totally check out his video. So now we have malted barley, which is this little bundle of awesomeness. It is starch and enzymes packed into a perfect little package for us, and the next thing we want to do is grind that up. The reason you grind it up is you want the water to be easily accessible to it when we get to the mashing stage. You want all of that starch to be utilized, to be dissolved, and then eventually converted by the enzymes. The tool you will want for that job is a grain mill, and I actually just made a video on my malt muncher and how to set it up just a little while ago. So if you would like to know more about that, once again, check the video out. So we have malted barley, we've crushed it up, and now we are ready to actually go ahead and do the mash. Essentially, all the mash is adding warm or hot water to the grain and letting it sit. Simple, right? And actually it is kind of simple. A lot of people get really hung up on this point, and if you want to totally geek out about it, you can. But on the other hand, if near enough's good enough and you just want to get started, it's really not something you should be scared of. It really can be very simple. Essentially, all you need to do at this step is give the barley a bath in warm water and hold it at the right-ish temperature for the period of that mash. We need to do it in water because it needs to be in solution. We need to be able to dissolve everything that's going on in there to allow the enzymes to do their thing. And we need to get the right temperature so we don't denature the enzymes, but it is warm enough for the enzymes to start working. I keep saying enzymes, right? Let's talk about alpha and beta amylase for just a second. As brewers, as distillers, there's two enzymes that we are most concerned with: alpha and beta amylase. Let's talk about alpha amylase first. Alpha amylase is most active at a slightly warmer temperature than beta amylase. Essentially what it does is takes the big complex starch molecules and cuts them up. It's kind of like a cleaver. It doesn't worry too much about where it's cutting things. It doesn't worry about what size it's cutting it down into. It's just hacking these big starch molecules down into smaller, more dissolvable molecules. Beta amylase, on the other hand, is more like a scalpel. It's the surgeon. It goes in and does a very specific job. It acts on the ends of those smaller molecules that the alpha amylase has created, and it nips off little maltose sugars, which are just perfect for our yeast to ferment. So when you're doing things naturally, you kind of need both of these enzymes working together to break the giant clumps of starch down into smaller manageable bits that can then be broken down into maltose, which is exactly what our yeast loves to eat. And this is the reason that we have a relatively narrow window for our mash. We need a temperature range where both of these enzymes are active, neither of them are being denatured, and we can actually promote a more or less fermentable wort depending on where in that temperature range we sit. Now that honestly is probably more of a thing for beer makers because they want to adjust the final gravity of their beer based on how fermentable the wort is. So for home distillers, we're really looking at the lower range of that temperature window, which is around about 62 to 64 degrees Celsius or 144 to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so let's review up until this point. We're using malted barley only. You can make your own or buy it. It's easy either way. We crush it down to allow the water to access the starch freely. We want to mash it at around about 62, 63 degrees to make a nice fermentable wort. So then we can take that sugary wort or wash and pitch yeast into it and ferment it. But, there's always a but. What if we're not using malted barley? I'm guessing that you guys could think of a ridiculously popular spirit that uses corn, unmalted corn. I can also think of another relatively popular spirit, Irish whiskey, which uses unmalted barley as well. How do we do with that stuff? So what I haven't mentioned up until this point is that you also need to gelatinize the starch before you even think of getting it into a mash. And the reason I haven't mentioned it is the process of malting and kilning automatically does this. So if it's a malted barley, you just don't have to worry about it. In fact, if it's a malted anything, you don't have to worry about it. So what is gelatinization? Essentially, gelatinization takes a super tight tangled ball of starch and loosens it up to the point where it can be accessed in solution by the enzymes to start breaking it down into smaller and smaller molecules, like we talked about before. So if you take unmalted corn, crush it up, throw it into your mash, even with the enzymes, nothing really is going to happen to that corn. So how do we gelatinize it? It's actually pretty simple. You literally put it in water and heat it. If you've ever made porridge, you've seen this. If you've ever made polenta, you've seen this. You'll get to a point where suddenly the starch molecules sort of swell up and the whole mixture becomes gooey and gummy and thick. That is gelatinization. So for those of you that have been looking into making whiskey from corn or anything like that, that is what the cooking stage or the boiling stage is for the corn. It's just gelatinization. It's worth noting right now that you can actually buy unmalted but gelatinized grains. Some forms of quick oats have been gelatinized, but from my understanding that differs depending on the region you're in, as does whether or not steam flaked barley is gelatinized. I don't understand how you can steam flake a barley and not gelatinize it, but apparently it happens. Okay, so we either buy unmalted gelatinized grains, or we heat the stuff up in hot water to gelatinize it, and now we're good to go, right? Actually, there's kind of a problem with that. Yes, it will be gelatinized, but you won't have any enzymes. And if you did have enzymes and you just boiled it or heated it up to 80 odd degrees Celsius, you denatured all of the enzymes, you killed them off. This is why most, traditional at least, all grain mashers will use malted barley. Even if you're using corn, you add malted barley. Even if you're using unmalted barley, you add malted barley. If you're using unmalted rye, you add malted barley. The idea is that malted barley has enough enzymes to convert anywhere between sort of 2 and 3 times the amount of starch that it itself contains. So if you're using 10 kilos of corn and you add 10 kilos of malted barley, depending on the type of malted barley, the malted barley will have enough enzymes to convert the corn as well. Okay, so let's go back and recap again, right? We need water, that's easy enough. We need starch. That starch can come from malted barley, or it can come from unmalted cereals as well, but you need to make sure the starch is gelatinized if it's not malted. Then we need the enzymes, which come from the malted barley, and as long as you've got enough malted barley to convert the other cereals as well, you're not going to have a problem. Some people do use bottled enzymes too, which is totally cool. I've never done it, but I will try it one day, I promise you. So now we have the gelatinized starch, the enzymes, the hot water. We add those together. Alpha and beta amylase enzymes go to work and chop that starch down into nice little maltose units that our yeast can use. We cool it down and we pitch the yeast. All right, team, I know if you haven't done this already yet, that is frustrating. I haven't told you how to do it. I haven't really told you where to start, but I promise you, when we do start doing all grain mashes, people are going to be asking questions, and this video is going to be the one that really helps them out. I hope. If you're in that situation, make sure you check the comments out down below, because honestly, team, that is where a lot of the magic happens around here. There's heaps of people down there that will help you out, and chances are someone else has asked the question already down there. If you're one of the guys that knows your stuff, feel free to jump down below, drop some comments about what I've missed out. I'm expecting someone should be talking about diastatic power down there. Hook me up, team. Trust me, everyone is going to appreciate it. But we will do a video on diastatic power, I promise you. It's that time of the video, guys, where I really need to thank the Patreons. You guys are awesome, and things like this are only available because of you. You guys are the ones providing me with grain to be able to do all grain mashes in the first place. So from me and everyone else that's watching these videos, thank you. So there we have it, guys, all grain mashes. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I had a whole lot of fun talking to you. So if you liked the video, hit the thumbs up for me. If you really liked it, make sure you subscribe down below and you ring the notification button, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.